my sisters and brothers, we have an incredibly basic, not at all abstract concept to talk about today. Concept Jesus spoke about quite a bit. The kingdom of God. Very basic, very easy thing to understand. Fairly regularly when I study Bible verses in groups with folks, they tend to ask what this whole kingdom of God thing is all about. My sarcasm aside, it's often a point of confusion. Most folks know the kingdom of God vaguely has something to do with God's intentions for the world. But sometimes knowing what God intends to do can get complicated. And even more often, it's really easy to get hung up on how, or especially when God intends to finally make something happen. Since Jesus was talking about the kingdom of God, God's reign on earth inbreaking over 2,000 years ago, for instance, one would think that God could have gotten around to making a lot of things happen by now. I mean, with all, horrific suffering, oppression, violence, fear we're confronted with nearly every day, it can sometimes be pretty hard to believe that God's kingdom is inbreaking into our world at all. To add to the confusion this Sunday, Jesus decides to explain what the kingdom of God is about through a couple of parables, little stories, kind of like analogies, comparisons, that often give us even a less concrete, seemingly less concrete explanation than what we started out with. While Jesus' parable about the mustard seed especially is a key passage for helping us understand what this seemingly crazily abstract concept, the kingdom of God, is all about, I'd suggest that we in fact start with something a little bit more recent, a bit more of a concrete story to help us begin moving forward to what Jesus was trying to get at. I actually heard this story for the first time while I was flying over to the Holy Land a couple weeks back during an in-flight movie, the 1982 biopic about Mohandas Gandhi, the father of the Indian independence movement. While there's much, of course, that this great man did that reflects the idea of the kingdom of God, God's intentions for the earth, there's one story in particular that I think gets to the heart of the matter. The story of Gandhi's Salt March. Does anyone know, familiar with that? Cool. Oh, you're awesome, man. You pay attention to your history class. It's good. So, to give you an idea of what this is all about. So, especially in India, a place that's, often very hot, a lot of parts of it kind of have a tropical climate. You sweat a lot, right? So salt is something that's integral to life, even more so than it is in a lot of other places. You need to replenish whatever, electrolytes. I'm not a chemist at all, but you gotta have a lot of salt. And so while the British were still in control of India, salt was something that almost anyone could fairly easily make. Just go to the ocean side, right, and boil some water and that sort of thing. And then you had your salt that you needed to, put in your food and replenish yourself and that sort of thing. But the British made it illegal to make your own salt, so that they could in turn, you'd in turn have to buy it, and then they would tax that business transaction and make some money. So it's 1930. Gandhi has come back from doing a lot of work in South Africa, and he's still, still kind of a fairly early part of the Indian independence movement. There's been some talk about trying to move forward, but the whole country really hasn't galvanized yet to kind of throw off the yoke of the British Empire. And what Gandhi decides to do is to do this incredibly small thing, incredibly simple thing, that had incredibly profound ramifications. So he takes off and starts simply just walking to the sea. I think it's like a 28-day walk, something like that. Takes off, walks to the sea. Eventually, people are cheering him on as he goes along, and eventually the line behind him stretches for over 2 miles, walking to the sea. And 24 days actually is how long he's walking. And he ends up getting there. And the next morning after he arrives at the sea, he kneels down, he says a quick prayer, and then he famously raises this little lump of salty mud, right, and declares declares, "With this I am shaking the foundations of the British Empire." With this I am shaking the foundations of the British Empire. The largest empire the world has ever known, especially back then, an incredibly powerful kind of maritime empire. With this little lump of salt, I'm shaking the foundations of the British Empire. And he goes down, kneels down, and starts evaporating the seawater to make salt. And then he implores thousands of the people that had followed him on the Great Salt March to do the same. And what happens next is amazing. So the whole independence movement galvanizes around this one particularly symbolic but incredibly profound action of starting to just make salt against the laws that the British Empire had put in place, especially laws that were oppressing people living in poverty that needed to buy something they otherwise could have made for free. So after that fact is when Time magazine in 1930 declares Gandhi Person of the Year. There's 2 front-page cover stories in the New York Times, and the Indian independence movement, while they weren't able to throw off the shackles of imperialism for years after that, it was sort of the deciding factor. The first Prime Minister of India said, and I can't pronounce his first name very well, but Jawaharlal Nehru said, "Of course, these movements exercised tremendous pressure on the British government," talking about what had happened before, "and shook the government machinery. But the real importance in my mind of the Great Salt March lay in the effect that it had on our own people, and especially the village masses. Non-cooperation dragged them out of the mire and gave them self-respect and self-reliance. They acted courageously and did not submit so easily to unjust oppression. Their outlook widened and they began to think a little in terms of India as a whole. It was a remarkable transformation, and the National Congress under Gandhi's leadership must have the credit for it." So, and then, by the way, Indian independence happened years later, but also Martin Luther King Jr., for instance, was amazingly inspired specifically by the Great Salt March. So, this one little tiny thing of just literally picking up a piece of mud and making salt completely changes the world. And it's not, so in my mind, that's sort of what the kingdom of God is all about. These little tiny, incredibly strategic, but incredibly profound actions that can have amazing effects. That is how God tends to work. I mean, it could be the smallest thing ever. It could just be simply feeding a hungry person or helping someone out who's being bullied at school. But you have no idea how God's going to be at work in these small, tiny human interactions, and especially human interactions that, in a very simple, concrete way, help out other people. Right? Making salt was something that was incredibly important and necessary for human life in India. Providing shade, like the mustard seed does, was something. It talks about the birds, but I think providing shade for everybody is something very deeply, profoundly necessary for human life. This is how God tends to work. There will always be mystery about the kingdom of God, because much of God and how God works will always be a mystery to us. It makes sense in that way then that Jesus often spoke about the kingdom of God, God's intentions for the world in parables, in ways that we'll never fully understand. But what we can know about the kingdom of God, about God's intentions here on earth, through the words of Jesus Christ, is not something abstract or complicated at all, but something that we know usually starts off incredibly small, but rapidly grows, and something that is incredibly simple and concrete and deeply provides for human need. That's what the kingdom of God is all about. The love of Christ moving forward in incredibly small ways that deeply, profoundly provide for people, and let people know that God loves them, and let people know that there is a hope in this world. So, no matter what oppression, maybe some sort of oppression or difficulty you might be feeling right now or facing, know that in these tiny, tiny, incredibly small ways, God is breaking into your own life as well. And when you go out there and do these incredibly simple, small things for others, that is the kingdom of God